Welcome to Call to Create. I'm Cassidy Beck, one of the new hosts of the show. This season, we're launching our Spark Award Spotlight series, a celebration of the creators who are lighting the world through their faith, their creativity, and their courage to follow divine callings. In this inaugural episode, I'm honored to be sitting down with Gunnar Michael Andersen. Welcome, Gunnar.
Hey, it's great to be here, Cassidy. Thank you for inviting me.
Congratulations on your Spark Award.
Thank you. Thank you. It was quite a surprise and a pleasant surprise for sure.
So, to tell you a little bit more about Gunnar Michael Andersen spent much of his professional life in software systems and global supply chains operations, partly out of practicality, perhaps partly out of fear. Yet deep within, he was always an artist, a composer with an unrelenting desire to create beauty and lift souls. Even amid the pressures of corporate life, long hours, and international travel, Gunnar quietly pursued his higher calling, composing music in the margins of life and holding fast to the creative fire that would not let him go. He is the creator of the podcast, a Brother Joseph podcast, and co-host of Still Learning, a Come Follow Me podcast, where he explores gospel principles with curiosity, humility, and heart. So his song "I Believe" has earned him is from Brother Joseph. It earned him a Spark Award for outstanding achievement in musical arts, which honored him both as an artist and a believer. So I feel like you've had such a fascinating journey, like going from a global supply chain operation to composing beautiful works about faith and history. When you look back on your life, can you see where God was steering you into this direction?
Yeah, I think when it became really obvious was in 2017, but I'm going to back it up to 1991, 1992.
Let's do it.
And yeah, and the reason why is because in 1992 is when I joined the church. And that was it. It took me about 5 years of kicking missionaries out of the house before my heart finally softened and I listened to the message. For the first 4 or 5 years, I was listening for reasons to not believe. I was right, and the conversion story is another story, but I had something happen to me that made me realize I wanted to believe it. And it had to do with some neighbors and their kids. And I had some young children. And I thought, okay, I really I want my children to be like those children. And so I listened. And part of that process was I needed to understand if Joseph Smith was a prophet. And so my wife, she joined on a testimony of the Book of Mormon, but I thought that was an awful lot of reading. And I felt if I knew that Joseph was a prophet of God, then I'd be willing to believe anything he wrote. I wouldn't ever find myself questioning, what about that line? I know that I can be hypercritical and nitpicky. And so I needed to, I felt I needed to understand Joseph. And so the missionaries really helped me. They got connected with other members who had books and cassette tapes and videotapes. And I kind of watched all this stuff and read about it and came away as I was reading it, I should say, I came away with the testimony of Joseph Smith. But as I was going through that process, and I was just flabbergasted about all of this American history that I had never been taught, that seemed so substantial. And I didn't understand why we didn't teach it. And it's so relevant to today. The, Back then, this is before the Civil War. So every state was a country. It was like the European Union, the United States was. And they considered themselves independent countries. And so when the Saints moved from Kirtland to Missouri, they were immigrants. When they moved from New York to Ohio, they were immigrants. And they were treated as immigrants, and people thought of them as immigrants. And so there was a big immigrant conflict. And anyway, there's just in addition to the religious conflicts and political conflicts. But anyway, as I went through this, I realized I felt that the story needed to be told as a musical. It needed to be told through music. It was just, there was too much passion. There was too much emotion. And the words I felt just were too dry. And while they can move you and they can convert you, I felt like music was really needed to tell the story, and not just a song about I believe Joseph and he saw the heavenly Father, but to just really feel like you were there and you were experiencing it with him. And I love music and I wrote music, but I didn't feel like I could do this. But from the very beginning, I felt like Joseph's story needed to be told through music. And go ahead.
No, you, please.
Yeah. So anyway, I fought the impulse to actually write anything. And along my journey, let's say from 1992 to 2017, I would make notes about his life. I was always reading some kind of biography, some kind of history of the church, some kind of history of Joseph, and it was very confusing. There are so many names that are so similar, and it just get all the Pratts confused, and anyway, all of them. But in 2017, I was kneeling and praying, and I felt reproved by the Lord. And I think it's the only time I've ever felt reproved for not working on this more diligently. I would tinker with it a little here and there, but in 2017, I felt like I was reproved. And I felt the Lord tell me two things. One was, if you work on it every day, just do something every day, that I would, that the Lord would take care of me and my family financially, that I would have no financial issues. I don't need to worry about money, and that the Lord would make up the difference. Whatever it is I thought I couldn't do, I was going to be able to do because the Lord was going to be there and he was going to help me through it. And so from that moment, every day I worked on it. And some days I had a very demanding job, and some days we're not, work didn't stop until 10 p.m. or something like this. And I'd be exhausted. And I'd sit down, maybe watch a little TV with my wife, and then we'd go off to bed. And I was like, oh, I haven't worked on it. I was supposed to work on it. So I'd get up and I'd open my laptop and I'd read what I had done because I was working on the script and lyrics and the music. And I might read what I wrote and change a comma to a semicolon, save it, and close it. And that was all I could do that day. And I took that from Joseph Smith's journal. I remember flipping through his journal, like, how did this guy keep a journal? His life was so extraordinary. So much was going on. How did he keep it? And I'm start reading through his journal. And I remember I ran across this one line where it said, walked 50 miles today, period. That's all it said. And I thought, I got it. I can do that. Right. But most days, what I realized was when I opened up that laptop to start working on it, no matter how tired I was, the first thing I do is review where I was. Before long, an hour and a half had gone by. The energy comes in and you just keep working it. And so that's what I've done since 2017, always something. So the other thing is, so that's the big thing. That's why I said 2017 is when I really noticed it. The other thing is I felt strongly impressed to not look beyond the mark. So friends would say, when is it gonna be a show? When are we gonna be able to come see it? And I'd say, I'm not even thinking about that. I don't want to start thinking about that. If I do, I know the way my mind works. Start thinking, I don't know a production company. How do I hire a good choreographer? I'll get all caught up in that and I haven't even written the thing yet. So let's just write it and let's start moving along. So I remember Elder Bednar speaking, and he talked about, in fact, he's got a three-part YouTube series. I think it's called Aspects of Light, something like this. And he talks about how revelation comes, how and sometimes it's like a light switch and the room suddenly lit up. Sometimes it's like a sunrise, gradually the revelation comes. But he said for him, he thinks most of the time it's like he's in a fog and he really can't see, but he can see just enough to know where his next step is. And so he says you take that step and then you can see just enough for the next step. And he said that's the way it works for him most of the time, one step at a time. And eventually the fog lifts and you understand. And that's what I've decided to do. I've decided the best way to move forward is to just do what you know needs to be done next and do that. The other thing that was really helpful to me was, frankly, to stop being jealous of other people's music. That was, I had a bit of a hang up on that. I'd listen to somebody else and I think, wow, I could never write something that good. That is so good. How did they do that? And I realized I didn't need to think about that. I just needed to write the best music I could write. You know, the world already had a Billy Joel. They already had an Andrew Lloyd Webber, they Lin-Manuel Miranda. The world already has those guys. So I needed to write my music, and it was going to be different. I still don't quite know what's different about it, but it is. So,
There
so
are
anyway, that's
so
what I
many
decided to
wonderful
do.
things. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That's what I decided. And then people start coming into your life and you start discovering things. And I said, one of the things I was hung up on was some of the piano parts I write are so complicated. I could never actually physically write them down. I could play them, but I couldn't figure out what I was doing. So I couldn't write it down. I found a group for like $100, they transcribe the whole thing and then I make the corrections and we move forward. And so that was really helpful. Found a bunch of recording artists online who could record the music in their home studios and they'd record their singing parts and send it back to me and I'd mix it and master it. And
That's
anyway,
incredible. I feel like you touched on so many really good points. I think the one that there are several that like really resonated with me. I really like the way that you put the comparison that you needed to stop thinking about other people's music. And there's that quote that says comparison is the thief of joy. And I think that is really easy to do. And I think especially now where it is so readily everybody's else's work, all the other things that people are working on are so readily available that it's really hard to just focus on the thing that you're working on and let them work on what they're doing. And I think that was such a good point.
yeah. The other thing is, and this came out of my relationship with Rebecca Burnham. I don't know if you've ever met
I love
Rebecca.
Rebecca. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
Rebecca.
So
She's been a guest on the podcast.
yeah, yeah. When we do the Come Follow Me podcast together, still learning.
Oh,
Yeah. But the one of the things that came out of one of our discussions on that podcast was that through exercising this creative energy, we have these spiritual experiences, and it's our way of communing with God. Or I should say, it's a way to commune with God, and it's a pretty profound way. I want to say every day working on Brother Joseph was a profound religious experience. I would walk in and talk to my wife, and I'd be in tears because of some phrase that had just come to me as I was working on the music, or some mistake that I had made as I was composing and wanted to, there's a certain progression I was working with, and I was liking what I was doing, and then I made a mistake. It wasn't what I intended to play, but I played something else, and it was better than what I had been doing. There have been some times where I would record into my DAW, my recording software. I'm playing and I'm recording. The whole idea is I'm building the song off of that, right? And in playing it, I just start playing something different, something that I wasn't intending to play. It's something I'd never played, and I would just run with it, and it turns out to be just great. A great part of the song. A couple of the songs in the show are actually just improvisations that turned into songs. And I only played them once. I just
Wow.
played them the one time I recorded it. That was it. Yeah.
Another point that you made that I love so much, you talked about like the fog and how Revelation is just one step ahead. And I really like to, because I think as creators, it's easy to step back and to think about, oh, okay, I need to do this, and think about the end gate, like your end
Yeah.
goal, and get so overwhelmed
Yeah.
by where you want to be that you're like afraid to take that
You
first step.
can't take that first step. Yeah.
Yes, and I love your point about just working like the here and now. Just do the one thing, just you're working on it every single day. And you're
Yeah.
doing, I guess, to coin what it was from Frozen 2, like the next right step, the next best thing.
Right.
And I think I also love how you talked about that with Revelation as well. That's also how Revelation works, or how it can, that
Right.
you don't get the whole path ahead of you, but you just get that one next step.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's part of moving forward in faith.
Mm.
Another thing, I'm paraphrasing Elder Bednar here for sure, but he made a comment that faith, if you go back to the lectures on faith, we understand that faith is a principle of action. So you can't just sit around and say you have faith. If you have faith, you actually do something, right? And so you need to just move. And I wasn't moving. I had this impression to write a musical on Joseph Smith, and I didn't have time to plan the whole thing out. I started by just, as I'm reading, if I read about something that happened to him that just I feel it, then I would stop reading and I'd spend the next month or so writing a song about it. And then I'd go back to reading. And I figured at some point when I have time, I'll figure out how all this stuff fits together. And that's how I did it. But the whole idea is to just put one foot in front of the other. He talked a little bit about the prayer of faith. He said that you can think of the prayer of faith as starting after you say amen. You pray about whatever you need to do, but the prayer of faith, since faith is a principle of action, is after you say amen, you then take action and move forward. And he said, don't worry about making the wrong decision. Don't worry about going in the wrong direction. The Lord will correct you if it's the wrong thing, and then switch directions. I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who said, in any moment of decision, the best decision you can make is the right decision. The next best decision you can make is the wrong decision. The worst decision you can make is no decision. And I think there's just a lot to that. I've had to rewrite a lot of songs I've written songs I probably will never use, but I've learned through the whole process. I feel like I've gotten better because I went through that process.
So I am going to ask you a question. If that's not something that you want to talk about, no problem. I'll ask another one.
Yeah.
But in listening to your story, I think your testimony is so intertwined with your music. I
Mhm.
am curious about what changed or what you saw in that family, that after all of this time, something changed. Would you feel comfortable talking to
Oh
us about that?
yeah. Yeah, it was a great family. So they were four kids. They were from 2 years old to 12. And at that season in our lives, I was playing semi-pro soccer, and we built a little soccer field in our backyard. And the kids and the neighborhood kids would always come by our house to play soccer with us. And my wife used to joke that they'd come over and they'd knock on the door and they'd say, "Can Gunnar come out and play?" And because we'd play street soccer, I'd play with them all over the place. And so this one Saturday morning, three neighbor kids who were not members of the church, but they were all siblings, came over to play soccer, and we played soccer in the backyard, and they were at each other's throats. They just hated each other. They were just all over. And they were like 7, 9, and 12. And so much yelling, complaining, and really anger. And I was breaking up fights all the time. And then they left. Within, I want to say, 5 or 10 minutes, these kids from up the street knock on the door. And I open up the door, and it's all four of them. And it's the first time all four of them ever came over together. You also should understand they were all blonde, and the sun was right behind them. The sun was shining through their hair, and they all looked like they had halos on their heads. And the 12-year-old was holding the 2-year-old. And the 12-year-old loved soccer, wanted to be a professional soccer player, wanted to play soccer in college. And first time the 2-year-old comes over. And so they come into the house, and he stays with the 2-year-old while the rest of us go out to play soccer because the 2-year-old was afraid of our dog. And so he stayed with the 2-year-old and played Candyland with the 2-year-old, with my wife, and with my youngest son, who was about the same age. And he stayed with her for half an hour until she was comfortable, until he was sure she was comfortable. And then he came out and played soccer with us. I would not have been able to do that when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
There's just no way I would have been able to do that. If she would have been on her own, I would have handed her off to the other mom or something.
Yeah.
And there was just this sweet love that he had for his sister. And then they got out to play, and it was just, I would say the difference between that first group of kids and this group of LDS children was the difference between being out in the world at the mall and being in the temple. It was a real spiritual experience for me. And when they were done playing, there was a time limit. Their parents said you'd be home by a certain time. They all, no problems. It was that time. They all reminded each other, and they all left. And I let them out the door. And I remember closing the door and turning to my wife and telling her, "Sweetheart, if believing in the Book of Mormon and following this faith means our kids will grow up to be like those children, I'm willing to believe anything."
Wow.
And so I said, "Call the missionaries." She had the connections, she had the numbers. "Call the missionaries. I'm willing to listen." The other thing that was very helpful is that set of missionaries. One of the problems I had with the missionaries all the time was I felt like they were trying to hit a number with me, that they were trying to sell me something. And I hated salespeople. I hated salespeople in my home. And, and
You feel like a transaction.
yeah, and when they're in your house, you got to kick them out. If you're out, trying to buy a car and you don't, the salesperson, you just walk away and leave. But this person's in my house defiling my home by trying to push something on me that I'm not interested in, right? So that was my issue with so many of the missionaries before this group that came in. And of course, my attitude changed too, right? And I remember this one elder looking at me. We're talking about the Book of Mormon. He looks at me and he says, when I was in high school, I had a testimony of the Book of Mormon. He says, I knew I had a testimony because my mother told me I did. And he said, I didn't get a testimony for myself until I was out on my mission, doing the service, reading the Book of Mormon. And as soon as he said that, I remember I sat, my ears perked up. I said, I can listen to this guy. Because if he was a salesperson, he would not have said, he would say he always believed. He wouldn't say there was a moment that he didn't believe. But he not only did he say he wasn't sure, he said he went out on a mission without being sure. And that was important to me. That was important to me. So I really appreciated how honest he was.
Yeah.
And he was the one that it was that set of missionaries who taught us that we ended up getting baptized through.
So, Gunnar, you're just full of surprises, and it is astonishing to me that you just casually dropped that you used to be a semi-pro soccer player. Can,
Oh yeah.
can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I I hate running, but I can't stop running if you put a ball in front of me. So I chase a ball all day long. I'm like a dog. I love soccer. I love soccer. I love the physical aspect of it. I love running into people. I love getting knocked down, being on. Yeah.
Who did you play for?
When it was semi-pro, which at that time, the definition of semi-pro was some players got paid and some didn't. I was on the some didn't side of that. Some coaches got paid, some didn't. It was in LA. It was a team called Santa Clarita United. It was fun because it seemed we were the only team that wasn't one nationality. There'd be a team, we'd play a team, an Argentine team, we played an Israeli team, a Russian team. It was fun.
That's really cool. That's really cool. What an incredible experience. That's awesome. And that was really funny. You just casually just put that there. Okay. So you've described yourself as someone that who was an artist all along, but you were also working in the corporate world. I'm
Yeah.
curious, how did it feel like to just keep holding on to that art creative fire before you were
Yeah.
able to step into it fully?
Yes. So throughout high school, I wanted to be a film composer. That was what I really wanted to do. And the I worked real hard to get into the Berklee College of Music as a composition major. And 2 weeks before class was supposed to start, I had already talked to my roommate. I had my classes. My parents came to me and said, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to afford this.
Oh,
And I thought they were going to pay for it. And so that was really devastating. And I remember working a couple of jobs to try to get up some money and try to figure out what I was going to do. And it was like this gut punch. But one of the things that happened through that process, and this, you can tie this all the way back to the Lord's hand, was that I realized that I really loved the woman I ended up marrying, that I really loved her, that I couldn't imagine a happy life that didn't involve seeing her the first thing every morning and seeing her as the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes at night. That I just wanted to be with her. And the life of a career musician can be a fairly unstable life. So I decided at that moment that I needed to pursue something else that was creative, that I wasn't ever going to be able to be happy if I wasn't exercising some kind of creativity. Ended up choosing computer programming, got into software development, and that's how I got into computer programming. It was really creative. At the time that I was doing it, it was extraordinarily creative because not everything was automated. People were doing most stuff was being done on paper. And so you were inventing new ways of doing things. Certainly, it's not as you didn't have the kind of creativity that you have today with AI and some of the things that are going on, but I focused on business systems. So that's how I got into that. About 20 years in or so, 15, 20 years in, software development, business software development became more about integrating with other systems and you weren't inventing things anymore. And so that was boring. So I got out of software development. But I was very fortunate. I had just gotten my MBA, and the guy who ran the company's operations decided to exit the company. And my boss comes to me, or his boss comes to me and says, Gunnar, you think you're all that because you got this MBA and you wrote all the systems and designed the systems that we use to run this business. Why don't you just try to run the business too? So that was very fortunate. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And so then I moved to manufacturing operations. I'm sorry if you can hear my dog.
I can't.
So I moved to manufacturing operations and then did that for 10, 15 years or so. And that's how that progression went. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And I'm curious too, because it seems like you've fully embraced now, like your music creativity. Was there something that, like, what happened in your life
Oh,
to allow you
yeah.
to go fully
Yeah.
into musical mode?
Yeah, so that's that. Yeah, so what happened was, so this is a pretty big company. It was a Fortune 200 company, and it was subject of a hostile takeover. And so what they did is they got rid of all the executives. And that's what happened to me. I got let go
This was a
with all,
company that you had created?
no,
Oh,
this was the company I was working for.
gotcha.
And they got rid of all the executives when they were taken over. And was talking to my wife, and I was like, I think I should go back to work because at some point I'm going to be too old for anybody to hire me, but then I'm not right now. And she said, "No, sweetheart," she says, "you should just do music full time." Now, she knew me from high school. She knew what my passions were, right? And she goes, "You should just focus full time on Brother Joseph, get that thing done." And she says, "You've got that promise from the Lord that as long as you work on Brother Joseph every day, we'll be okay." And she goes, "And I believe it. So just
Wow.
do that."
That's incredible. I feel like she's been instrumental in your life, like pivots.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way. I hadn't really thought of that. You're right.
If you were giving advice to people that are have this creative, I don't want to call it a bug because it's a part of our DNA that they have something creative that they have an outlet for, but are also like concerned about the practicality of life and of providing for families, what would you say to them?
Yeah. First off, I would say if you've got the urge, you just need to do it. Don't, my opinion is don't worry about monetizing it. Worry about doing it. It's because at a minimum, it is a way you feel God. It is a way to draw a connector, to strengthen your connection with your Savior, with the Holy Spirit, with the Lord. The So you shouldn't deny it. If you have any thoughts about imposter syndrome or you're just not good enough, just understand that fear, uncertainty, doubt, those are not messages that come from the Lord. Those are messages from the adversary. And if you're getting those messages, it's probably because the adversary is afraid of you and you need to move forward. My wife has always had this desire to paint, and I keep encouraging her to paint, encouraging her. And so she's been doing it the last 6 years or so. And one of the things that she would tell me was like, to what end am I doing this? I know why you're doing your music. You want to create a show and you want to put a show on. I understand that. I don't understand my desire to paint. And I was like, why do you need to understand it? Just paint. And she would say, but I'm not very good. I just copy stuff. And I said, so did Raphael. So the difference between Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci, and you is that they did not have the ability to take a picture. They would have to sit there and look at it. But that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're copying. But now she's become quite a good artist, quite a good artist. And they even had she got her first commission just recently in the last month or so.
Oh, that's exciting.
It's,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
So, in with the last question, actually, I have two more questions for you. Is there a music, scripture, song, something that is you're finding inspiration from right now?
So I have been drawing a lot of inspiration from Emma Smith. In fact, all those sisters from the early days of the church were really super remarkable. And we have a tendency to not talk about them as much because we don't have like detailed transactional history on them, but we do. A few of them have this good journals, so we know what was going on in their lives. About 2 years ago, I was prompted to stop working on Brother Joseph in terms of the script and the music, and instead take 6 months or so and read about Emma. Just devour everything you could about Emma. So that's still working on the show. It's just more on the research end instead of creative end. And the reason why the way the prompting came to me is was that I felt the Lord was telling me that I was treating Emma in the show as treating her as a prop.
Mm.
She was just something else in Joseph's life. But the show is about Joseph, and we've got all these other people, and Emma just happens to be one of them. And that was doing her a disservice. And so I started reading about her, and she just blew me away. She so amazing. And now, in fact, as you look at the songs, I think she has more songs than Joseph has. The Her courage and faith and strength, that's just amazing. So absolutely inspirational. And right now, today, so I've put out an album called the original Brother Joseph, the original concept album, 2.5 hours, and it covers the whole arc, of Joseph's story. But it's missing some key moments, and it needs to be tightened up a little bit. And so I'm still working on the show. So my next step, the next step in the fog, is to put together what I think is the final show, right? And record a studio album of the final show, and then try to start getting it produced. But in so doing, what I'm working on right now is that moment in Nauvoo in June, around the 23rd of June, 1844, a few days before the martyrdom. when Joseph and Hiram leave to escape the arrest and trial in Carthage. And we hear that Emma writes a letter to Joseph, which we don't have. And it gets delivered to him on the other side of the Mississippi. And he says, and she's encouraging him to come home. And so he comes back and he goes off to Carthage. When you read that history, there's a, first off, there's a lot of fear in Nauvoo. There's a lot of turmoil. A lot of people are really upset about a lot of things, and they're scared about the militia forming and what the governor's doing. Governor Ford's being very threatening. But there were three brothers, three brethren who approached Emma and to try to convince her to write this letter. And they apparently were in the mansion house for an hour just trying to talk her into writing this letter, and she ends up writing this letter. After Joseph's martyred, she takes a lot of flack for writing the letter that sent him to Carthage and got him killed. And I just don't think it really went down that way. Yeah. And so I've been working on this piece of music that tries to convey just how anxious everybody was and put it includes the letter from Governor Ford to Joseph saying that if he doesn't turn himself in, the city will die. He's going to destroy the city. And so you get Hiram and Joseph's decision, or the rationale behind their decision to leave. And then you get all this pressure on Emma from all sides. And everybody just panicked about what's going on. And then she writes this letter. And I just love the way the letter came out. And the thing is, the reason why the letter came out so well is because 5 months ago, I was impressed to write a song which is called Letters of Love about Joseph and Emma's correspondence with each other, just pulling out their emotions, their love for each other from those letters. And I cast it in Liberty Jail when Joseph's in Liberty Jail, writing back and forth between Emma and Joseph. And my point is that it opens the same way, it closes the same way. So you've got these references back to the original letter, which none of that was planned. It just happened organically. And I think it's incredible. I think it's, I think it's really moving. It's stressful. I played it for my wife. She got really angry at everybody who was leaning on Emma
Yeah, yeah,
and how fragile their faith was in some cases.
yeah, yeah. Where can people find your stuff? How can we support you?
I appreciate that very much. So the all the music that I've released is out on all digital streaming services. So if you look for Gunnar Michael Andersen, you'll find it. An easy place to go is gunnarandersen.com, and because there'll be links to everything from gunnarandersen.com, and you'll be able to find it on Spotify, iTunes, etc. You won't necessarily get the work in process stuff, but you'll get the stuff that's been released, and you get a real good feel for my vision for the Joseph Smith story, which, which, by the way, is I'm trying very hard not to do a sanitized version of that story. I'm trying to do the real story as I understand it from everything that I've read and done. And there's some just incredible stories. If most people don't know the first miracle in the church when Joseph cast a demon out of Newell Knight, and that's in there. And yeah,
That's awesome. And what a great way to learn about more about history and
yeah.
about someone whose importance in our church can't be overstated.
I've been feeling so sad, especially the last 5 years, breaks my heart. I've seen a number of people personally leave the church because they questioned their testimony on Joseph Smith, or they lost their testimony of Joseph Smith. And in every case, it's over a misunderstanding of history. Or they just have a partial understanding of it. And somebody once told me the issue is not knowing church history. The issue is not knowing enough church history. And I would say that I have a testimony of that principle. You can read something that strikes you as odd, and I would say, keep reading. Don't stop there. Keep reading. Understand the context in which that was said, that was in which that was done, and keep moving forward.
I love it. What great words of wisdom to end on. Gunnar, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
I really appreciate it, Cassidy. Thank you for taking the time with me. I enjoyed it.